Using terms like, oh, I don't know, behaving like every harlot in history. Reference David Blunkett. Or betrayal, this sort of language, actually makes people like me on the progressive side of the Liberal Democrats, which is most of the activists and the majority of the membership. You know, we don't control who votes for us, pretty much. We can't account for them. But certainly these core people, it makes us more defensive and protective. And because we have a party that makes its policy democratically, we know, this probably doesn't apply as much in the Labour Party, we know we can change and create a manifesto for the next election from within that is progressive and radical and distinctive, and we will actively work against being linked with the Conservatives as far as we can. There will be no pacts and so forth. And because we have that option, we don't need to be charmed by someone who's offensive to us. And it's not rational to say that if you make a coalition deal with the Conservatives, you've betrayed people. But if it had been with Labour, had the arithmetic been there, and Labour not been seen to have lost their mandate, that wouldn't have been betrayal. That doesn't appeal to rational people as rational. And there are a number of rational people in the electorate, and even a few in politics, and some of them are in the Liberal Democrats. So we don't react well to that, and it's not a productive approach. I can understand the instinctive nature and feeling sore and feeling bruised, but in the medium to long term, and I think the short term's over now, I don't think that's sensible if, as many of us do, recognise that the most natural coalition partners for the Liberal Democrats, if the arithmetic and the policy overlap is there, is with the Labour Party, and that is the view of the majority of Liberal Democrat MPs, the majority of Liberal Democrat activists, and the majority of Liberal Democrat members. John Leech will tell you what it's like as someone who fights Labour, as I don't in my seat, whether that's still his view, but all I can do is speak for the majority of Liberal Democrat MPs, activists and members.
Thank you very much. Sunder, are Fabians Lib Labbers?
Well, I'm keen on Lib Lab dialogue. That's why Fabians have been having these debates for several years with Centre Forum. We've been glad to do so. I think it's important to keep that dialogue going in these very difficult circumstances. I accept what David says about the election result. I'd be in principle keener actually on a progressive alliance as having some strengths in itself were it possible, but in an election which nobody won but Labour lost, where the arithmetic was very, very difficult, it was enormously difficult. Maybe it was the faintest of possibilities. It was a very faint possibilities. The Liberal Democrats did have choices. They were all difficult. And those who oppose this coalition have to say it was a legitimate democratic choice to form it. But even having formed the coalition, I think Liberal Democrats then had choices about what the coalition means, and I think this remains a live debate. Is it a shared ideological project of David Cameron and Nick Clegg because they see the world in the same way and they want to help roll back the state because Labour is far too statist in general rather than on a specific set of issues? Or is it a coalition they happen to form because that's how the arithmetic fell? Is it a long-term realignment of British politics where the centre-right now has more in common than the centre-left has in common? Or is it for this term? I think these are important debates, and actually Craig's early talking about the coalition, the sort of rose garden, mood music, it was very kind of Blair Bush, to use an unhappy analogy. And the debate with the Liberal Democrats about whether you can say anything about your disagreements with a partner, or whether you have to keep them all to yourself or you lose your influence. That's very Blair Bush too, and the Liberal Democrats keep telling us how badly that ended, so they might learn something from it themselves. So we keep the dialogue going, but I think it's up to the Liberal Democrats to show actually that there's mature dialogue between the Liberal Democrats and opposition parties, not just a kind of a coalition with the new mood music of that, because there is a risk, I think, that the Liberal Democrat leader becomes the kind of chief anti-Labour hitman for a coalition government that is doing this, when one of the things he wants is an alternative vote referendum to be won, which I'm in favour of, David has his doubts about, but it will be won or lost depending on how Labour voters vote. It's going to be difficult in the mood of these cuts, so it's important to look at that. I think there are lots of areas. We have plural politics. There probably will be more hung parliaments in the future over time. There are local issues, as David said. 7 months' time, an election in Scotland. I think the Labour Party will win it in terms of being the largest party. It's a PR system. We will have to form a minority government and beg our budget through with Liberal Democrat or SNP or Tory votes. Or we'll have to form a coalition with the Lib Democrats, as we've done before. So we might be 7 months away from a national Lib Lab coalition. Whether the Lib Dems will then look like every harlot in history if they're in 2 different governments in Scotland and Westminster. Some people say that, other people say it makes your case for you. You form the coalitions that you can form to have the influence you can have. The Clegg Cameron dream in Scotland might be a long time coming if they only share 25% of the vote. So that probably isn't an option for them there. So I think there are lots of issues. I think there were policy issues in Parliament. It's still a hung Parliament where things aren't in the coalition agreement. Take student finance. It's going to be a very important issue. If the Liberal Democrats say we're going to accept Tory policy and abstain on it, we're going to disagree but abstain, they give the Tory party a majority the Tory party does not hold in Parliament. Maybe there are alternative consensuses on that issue. So I think we need to do that. Evan's points about tone are quite important. I think if you judge politics by what people say in a leadership election all the time, if you judge it by what activists say on Twitter and so on, there's obviously a lot of cut and thrust. I think the debate in both parties is quite mature about the future of politics. I think there are big differences between us on issues such as the deficit, where I think the Liberal Democrats, either as a trade-off or because they changed their minds, are now not in the position they held before the election. The position they held before the election is still the position Labour holds. It's quite a sensible position. It's for slower cuts. It's for recognising that cuts are necessary. So, we'd be keen to try and reopen that. There are issues like the housing benefit changes that I imagine enormous numbers of Liberal Democrats are quite worried about. Steve Webb in government has signalled he's quite worried about them. We should be looking to form these alliances on issues. So I think we're allowed to oppose each other. We're different parties. We're allowed to challenge and attack choices the Liberal Democrats make. They're allowed to defend them. But I think there remains an issue that in public debate we're on the same side of a lot of really big issues in our society. Climate change, Europe, inequality. It's nice when the Conservatives say they're on the same side as well. But I do think, the parties that want to do something about it are the parties of the centre-left. And I think people in the Labour Party want to have a mature tone towards the Liberal Democrats. They want to hear the Liberal Democrats say, whichever coalition we are in, we are a party of the centre-left. And on that basis, I think we can have dialogue in the future.
Thank you very much. John Leech, how happy were you from day one at the thought of going into both the Tories?
Well, thank you, Polly. I wouldn't say I was overjoyed, but we'll see. We'll see. I'm part of the coalition, and I'm quite happy to see it continue as it is at the moment. I was actually quite surprised to get invited along tonight, and I did wonder whether, as a Lib Dem Manchester MP, I might need to bring a tin hat with me. In the spirit of new politics, I was delighted to accept the invitation.
Just a minute.
So is the
Is
the Lib Lab coalition gone forever? Well, I'm absolutely clear that this is not the case. And if I really thought that it was, I wouldn't have spent my time coming tonight just to say so. As one of only 3 Liberal Democrat MPs who didn't vote for the coalition, I'm clear that we shouldn't be closing the door on a future coalition with the Labour Party. But I think I should start by questioning whether there could have been a coalition with Labour this time after they've been in power since 1997. Here in the North West, you could be forgiven for thinking that a coalition between the Lib Dems and Labour was impossible, given the hostility between the two parties. In the past, in Greater Manchester, for example, the Labour Party has done deals with the Tories in places like Rochdale and Oldham to keep the Lib Dems out. And no one would ever suggest that there was a love-in here in the city of Manchester between the Lib Dems and Labour, or, for that matter, down the East Lancs Road in Liverpool. Even the wrong side of the Pennines, in places like Sheffield, where David is, the competition between the two parties makes it very difficult for us to be in a coalition together.